Joining us on the line is Abigail Shrier. She's a frequent Wall Street Journal contributor, author of the upcoming book, Irreversible Damage, The Transgender Craze, Seducing Our Daughters. It is a fantastic and vital book and a brave book because you're not going to get anything but crap from people for suggesting that maybe boys and girls exist these days. Abigail, thanks so much for joining the show.
Thanks so much for having me on.
So I'm sure that you followed the Supreme Court decision on LGBT rights now being read into the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The putting aside the sexual orientation issue being read into the Civil Rights Act of 64, which clearly was not meant to be, the idea of reading transgenderism, the gender identity, into sex in the Civil Rights Act is utterly bizarre. It's really weird because it actually puts Title VII, which has now been interpreted to mean that I can't fire somebody for identifying as a member of the opposite sex at my office. It puts it in direct conflict with Title IX, which protects women in the workplace. So what do you make of the Supreme Court's decision here?
So I sort of think of this as an Amelia Bedelia opinion. So Gorsuch pretends to be following the text, very much like the character Amelia Bedelia does in the school in the children's books. Amelia Bedelia is the housekeeper, and she just follows everything so literally. And Mrs. Rogers says, "Prune the bushes," so she puts prunes in the bushes, or dust the curtains, so she puts dust in the curtains, and she can never imagine what she's done wrong. And that's what Gorsuch, for the majority, did with the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. He said that, look, I'm just following this. We can't discriminate on the basis of sex, and because a biological man who shows up, dressed as a woman for work, if you fire him, that's partly because of his sex, then that must be in violation of Title VII. This is an amazingly disingenuous claim. The purpose of Title VII was to ensure that women wouldn't continue to be disfavored in the broader society. And Gorsuch read it in a way specifically to endanger them. It really, I don't think I've ever read such a disingenuous opinion.
It's pretty incredible. One of my favorite parts of the opinion is that it overtly rejects the claim of transgender people to be members of the sex to which they claim membership, but may make it illegal for you to mention this in the workplace. So the entire case for sex discrimination on the basis of transgenderism is you're treating a man differently than you would treat a woman, right? So that is acknowledging that a man is not a woman, right? So if a woman came dressed up in a dress one day to work, she wouldn't be fired. But if a man comes up dressed in a dress one day to work, then he is fired, then that is discrimination because you're discriminating against him as a man. But that is rejecting the claim of transgender women that they are in fact women, right? That is suggesting that they are in fact biological men, and you're discriminating against them on the basis that they are a biological man. So what this has created is this bizarre situation where if a man comes dressed to work as a woman, and then I'm not allowed to fire him because he is a man dressed as a woman. And so I'd be discriminating on the basis of him being a man. But if I say you're a man dressed as a woman, so I can't fire you, then I have now committed some act of sex discrimination in the workplace.
That's right. I mean, he did, that's right. He sort of acknowledges transgenderism, and you expect, by his own logic, you expect him to reach the opposite result that he does. He sort of gave Title VII a sex change operation, in his pretending, to have a literal, or his, pretending to have a textualist reading. He says you can't discriminate against someone, wherever you treat them differently by taking note of their biological sex. And this is, for the reasons you said, is going to have profound implications. He denies, the majority under Gorsuch writings for the majority denies that it will have impact on women's only spaces in terms of locker rooms, bathrooms, battered women's shelters, prisons. But of course, by the own logic of the opinion, those things go out the window. There's no, following the logic of this precedent, there really is no way to bar biological men on the basis of their sex, as you said, on the basis of their being man, from entering a woman's locker room. This is a very bad opinion for women. Yeah.
I mean, Abigail, what do you think? Do you think that, I feel like this is the cultural precursor to the notion that it is a form of child abuse to ban people from things like transgender surgery, because this is obviously part of a broader movement to suggest that there is that if you are transgender, then all of your claims are not only have a right to make the claim, which obviously you do, but you are legitimate in that claim as a matter of law, which would suggest that if you're a 17-year-old or a 16-year-old and your parent denies you a transgender surgery, theoretically they're being abusive. It feels like this is part of a line that is leading to that conclusion.
That's really interesting. I think that's right. I hadn't thought of that, but I think that's right because they acknowledge transgender status as if it's this immutable thing that you're just come with. So if you have, it's sort of, and like any other status, there are women and then there are people with transgender status, and of course you can't deny women their rights. So you can't deny anybody who has transgender status their rights, and that right could include the right to, surgery or all kinds of other things. I mean, one of the things that, Alito and others raised, which I think is really important, is all the litany of constitutional rights that are now, coming right in front of the steamroller. And one of them, of course, is I don't know how a religious school can fire a teacher who decides to start cross-dressing in the classroom. There's a ministerial exception, but I don't know that they'll grant that for a math teacher in the classroom. It's going to have profound implications.
And not just in schools. I mean, I've been worried about this too because I think both of us went to Jewish schools, and there was the Hebrew side, and then there was the secular side. The secular side, they were just normal secular teachers trying to claim they have to abide by Jewish standards. Obviously, is not going to hold. It's going to be very difficult to say that. You could see the court saying, well, if you're a rabbi, you're not allowed to cross dress, but if you're the science teacher, then you're totally allowed to cross dress at the school that completely disagrees with this particular set of values. It also has significant ramifications for healthcare because obviously there are a lot of Catholic hospitals, and Catholic hospitals might say, you know what, we don't want to perform a transgender surgery. Well, now you are denying somebody their rights, perhaps under the Civil Rights Act of '64 through this rereading.
I think that's exactly right, and I actually expect that's where the court would go. I mean, just following this precedent. I mean, we never know, but just following this precedent, that is what I think they're setting up because, their claim would be, well, it's as you said, I went to a Jewish school, and that it's just a math teacher that doesn't affect your values. And Alito notes this in his dissent. He says if you're a religious institution in which you do not, believe that boys should be dressing as girls, biological boys should be, it's really hard to convey that message when you then hire all these teachers, even if it's on the secular side, who are, in violation of your values. So I think you're right. That's what this is teeing up.
Abigail Shrier, she's a frequent Wall Street Journal contributor, author of the upcoming book, Irreversible Damage, the Transgender Craze, Seducing Our Daughters. So Abigail, I'm sure you've also been following the controversy surrounding J.K. Rowling over in the UK, who committed the unpardonable sin of mentioning that it is threatening to women if you say that a man is a woman, and that subjecting women to having to share locker rooms with biological men is in fact not good for women. What did you make of the controversy? And do you think that there will in fact be a cultural backlash to this? Because it seems like the transgender movement is moving so quickly on so many fronts that it's even placing people like J.K. Rowling off limits.
I hope there is a backlash to this because this is getting ridiculous. I mean, she, it was amazing. It just so happens that she mentioned exactly what my book is about, which is, she points out that if she had been a teenage girl going through all the things that teenage girls go through and knew that becoming a boy could have been an option, she would have considered it. And it's something that all women go through. We go through this period of adolescence in which life is really confusing and your body is changing and things are hard. And right now, teenagers are presented with the option, well, then change your gender, have some testosterone. And I hope there's backlash to that because right now what we're seeing it spread through the schools so quickly in numbers that don't make any sense with gender dysphoria. And I think J.K. Rowling was right on the mark. And I hope there's a backlash to the amazing attempts to cancel her for just speaking the truth.
So maybe you can talk for just a minute about some of the threats that this does present, particularly to young and vulnerable girls. I mean, J.K. Rowling makes the claim, and this has been backed by other claims in the UK, that a disproportionate number of autistic kids are now basically suggesting they're transgender. There has been significant shifts in the gender of the people who are claiming that they are transgender, that it used to be very much biological males claiming they are transgender. Now it seems to be a majority of females in the UK, that the numbers have really spiked. What's happening here?
It's a majority, and actually all across the West, women have taken over the demographic. Young teenage girls have taken over the demographic, and that's what my book's about. Out of nowhere, teenage girls with no history of gender dysphoria are now the leading demographic. And what's happening here as I say in the book, is pure contagion. And this is based on, the research of public health researcher Lisa Littman. This is not my own scientific work, but I'm just the journalist who wrote the story. They have, out of nowhere, taken this on. It's a pure contagion, meaning it's the thing they've sort of reached out for to claim to sort of as a location of their distress. This is what they call it, gender dysphoria, but they might call it, demonic possession, and they might call it anorexia or being too fat. I mean, they could have called it anything that, pure contagion, or that, these hysterias go by. This is what's happening. It's happening all across the West.
Well, Abigail Shrier, her brand new book, which is out shortly, is called Irreversible Damage, The Transgender Craze, Seducing Our Daughters. Go pre-order it right now. Abigail is one of the bravest members of the media for actually talking about an unmentionable, unpardonable topic. Abigail, really appreciate the time.
Thank you so much. Great to be on.
I hope you enjoyed that clip from The Ben Shapiro Show. If you did, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you stay up to date on all of our future content.